Right now, someone is about to give up on their dream, on their better future, on the very thing they once wanted so badly. And maybe that someone is you. But what if I told you that this moment, the one that feels like the end, might actually be your beginning? Because every successful person you admire, they felt this way too. Feeling overwhelmed by doubt and hope seems hopeless. And all you can think is, this isn't worth it. But right beyond that breaking point is where the real breakthrough happens. Because persistence isn't just a mindset, it's a biological process that rewires your brain, strengthens your body, and shifts your reality. So before you give up, let me explain to you what actually happens when you don't. Hey friend, I'm Christy, board certified nurse practitioner, health coach, and trauma survivor. Welcome to Trauma Free, where I help you change your mind and change your life just like I did, using what I've lived through and what science proves. And in today's video, we're going far beyond surface level motivation. We're going deep into the neuroscience of perseverance, the psychology of why most people quit, and the spiritual and quantum forces that reward you for staying along, with the science-backed tools to help you push past the point where most people give up. So if you're standing in the dip right now, that dark space between where you started and where you're going, just know this isn't your end. It's your turning point. So let's get into it. First off, giving up might feel like relief today, but it leads to regret tomorrow. And if you've ever blamed yourself for not being strong enough to push through, let me stop you right there. Because you are biologically wired to quit. In neuroscience, this is known as energy efficiency bias. Your brain's number one job is to keep you alive. So the moment you face resistance, uncertainty, or emotional fatigue, your brain assumes that you're in danger. And what does it do to protect you? It will depress your motivation and decrease dopamine production in the midbrain, making quitting feel logical because it feels so risky, so you end up stopping before you get hurt. But when you push past just 5 to 10% of the discomfort, dopamine not only recovers, it spikes, activating areas linked to creative problem solving, reward, and even spiritual insight by way of the anterior cingulate cortex and prefrontal cortex. So basically, the reward comes after the resistance, not before, not during, but after. I want you to imagine your progress like an iceberg. The 10% above the surface, that's what you see, the results, the milestones, and the feedback. But the 90% beneath the water, that's where the real transformation is happening. Neural rewiring, emotional fortitude, subconscious belief shifts, pattern interruption, and even cellular repair. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not happening. Growth often happens silently, slowly, and in the dark. It's like a lotus flower that grows through the mud before breaking through and blooming. So the moment you want to quit might actually be the moment right before your breakthrough bursts through the surface. Let's look at failure from another perspective, because the struggle you're in right now is actually making you smarter, stronger, and more prepared than ever before. Because of a term called productive failure, where researchers found that students who struggled and failed before arriving at the correct solution actually developed 3 times more neural connections than students who succeeded easily and immediately. In fact, it's been reported that failure wires the brain for adaptability, deeper insight, and long-term learning. So let that process. Failure isn't bad. It helps the brain grow, and struggles force your brain to reorganize and rewire. And that rewiring, that's neuroplasticity in action, which is the basis for transformation. Take this into consideration. A study from the U.S. Army on how soldiers handled extreme stress during endurance missions found that those who focused on the next checkpoint rather it be the next marker or the next water break, consistently outperform those who fixated on the end goal. Why? Because the finish line often feels too far away, too uncertain, and too overwhelming. But when you narrow your focus to just the next step, your brain perceives progress, which fuels your persistence. And this taps into what psychologists call behavioral momentum, which is small wins, because every tiny one releases dopamine, and that dopamine fuels the next small step, creating a self reinforcing loop. You complete a step, then you get a reward, then you receive more motivation, then you take another step, then you get another reward, then you end up with confidence. Persistence doesn't require some kind of massive strength. It requires micro decisions daily, like getting out of bed when it feels easier to hide, sending that email or taking that walk, because every time you keep going, especially when it's hard, you're teaching your nervous system that you can handle discomfort. And persistence doesn't just help you succeed, it changes your identity. You stop seeing yourself as the person who gives up and starts becoming the person who gets back up. I know you've heard or even said this to yourself. Don't quit or keep going. You got this. But what if I told you that science goes deeper than motivation? Because pushing through isn't just good advice. It actually alters your brain, shapes your future, and will even impact your future lineage. So let's go beyond the surface and look even deeper into the science of spiritual strength to keep you moving forward towards your goals. In quantum physics, there's a phenomenon called entanglement. Two particles become so deeply connected that changing one instantly affects the other, even across great distances. Now here's where it gets crazy. Your repeated action, focused thought, and emotional investment in a goal, it entangles your energy with their outcome. And this is tied to the observer effect, where simply observing a quantum particle changes its state from potential to actual. So what that means is, the more you show up, the more life shows up for you. Every time you take action, no matter how small, you're telling the universe, this is real for me. Persistence turns maybe into must. So don't quit early. Stay and build and trust, because the win is coming, but only if you're there when it arrives. You're not just fighting for you. You're shaping future generations at the cellular level. Epigenetic research specifically studies on adversity reveals that consistent effort during trauma or struggle activates genes linked to resilience and anti-aging, like telomerase, which protects DNA from decay. For example, babies born to mothers who endured famine in 1944 through 1945 showed enhanced stress regulation abilities decades later because their nervous systems remembered the hardships and adapted. So what you're going through today may literally pass along through your family line, because when you persist, even when it hurts, you're writing resilience into your DNA. You've heard of post-traumatic stress, but have you heard of post-traumatic growth? It's a phenomenon where adversity leads to a new perspective and purpose in your life. Researchers have found that people who reached their lowest emotional points often reported the greatest breakthroughs in identity, faith, and creativity. And this is what I call the phoenix mechanism, because you're just like a phoenix, and burning down is part of rising up. So your old identity has to burn down for your soul to rise up. And you don't come back the same. You come back wiser, stronger, and reborn. We often hear that flow, that peak state of creativity and focus, comes when challenge and skill are perfectly matched. But what if that's not the only path? Because neuroscientists have discovered something surprising. When challenge exceeds skill by just 4% to 17%, the brain is pushed into a powerful struggle-induced flow state. where neurochemicals like norepinephrine for alertness, dopamine for motivation, and anandamide for insight and creativity are all released when we're outside our comfort zone but still moving forward. So, next time it feels like you're overwhelmed or you're not ready, remember you're in the middle of a transformation. So, keep going, not because it's easy, but because you're not done yet. So now that you know why it's so hard, why the brain screams for comfort, and why reality bends in your favor only after you keep showing up, but how do you keep going when your willpower is gone and your vision is getting blurry? Well, here's your blueprint using my persistence protocol, starting with step one, the 24-hour rule. When you feel like quitting, don't make that decision today because emotion distorts your perception. Stress shrinks the prefrontal cortex, your logic center. Cortisol narrows attention and exaggerates fear, which research has validated, showing that emotional decisions are 40% more likely to be regretted than those made after just 24 hours of time. So give your nervous system a reset. Sleep, breathe, take some time, then decide. Step 2. Use quantum anchoring. Your brain doesn't distinguish between imagination and reality. It fires the same neural circuits whether you're remembering, doing, or visualizing something. So when you feel like giving up, anchor into a future version of you. The you who stayed the course, the you who healed, the you who made it. Feel their peace, their energy, and their power. Now act from them, not from the fearful version of you that's caught in survival mode, because this creates a neural shortcut between your present difficulties and your future success. Neuroscience calls this self-directed neuroplasticity because you're rewiring your identity through your imagination. Step 3. Break it down. The brain loves clarity, so when you stare at the entire mountain, it panics. But if you shrink the mountain into a micro step, you engage the dopamine reward loop. Every small win releases dopamine, which builds momentum that creates motivation. So instead of trying to fix your whole life, do one small thing to get closer towards your bigger goal. And keep doing this every day. Do what's doable for you. If it's sending one email or drinking one glass of water daily, because progress isn't about doing everything, it's about doing something repeatedly. And science has shown us that tiny acts done consistently change behavior faster than massive efforts done inconsistently. Now, let's talk about something most people miss. Breakthroughs aren't usually loud, sudden, or epic. They're built quietly in the shadows of consistency by small actions that compound in ways the brain doesn't intuitively understand. So, to better comprehend this, imagine you have a penny. You could either option 1, leave it alone, and after 30 days, it's still just 1 penny. Or option 2, you double it every day. Day 1, you have 1 cent. Day 5, 16 cents. Day 10, $5.12, and so on. Tiny efforts like doubling a penny feel pointless at first, but small consistent gains create big results if you don't quit early. So try this. Pick one thing to double daily for 2 weeks and see what happens. Now, I want you to think about this. You're pushing a boulder up a hill. At first, it's exhausting. Every step feels pointless. Your muscles burn. The boulder barely moves. People watching might even say, why bother? It's not going anywhere. But here's what they don't see. There's an invisible line near the top of the hill. Once you cross it, something changes. The weight shifts and the boulder starts rolling on its own. And suddenly, you're not pushing it anymore. You're steering it. And that's your breakthrough threshold. Before the threshold, effort feels wasted. Progress is invisible. But after the threshold, momentum works for you and doors begin to open. But most people stop right before things switch in their favor. So keep going. You're closer than you think. Let's be real. Right now, someone is watching you. Maybe it's your child, maybe it's your partner, your sibling, or maybe it's someone online who doesn't even know your name, but they see you trying, and your decision to keep going doesn't just change your story, it gives someone else the courage to rewrite theirs because social modeling is real. And when people observe someone else persist through difficulties, their own persistence increases by 35%. Because our brains are wired for mirroring, a form of subconscious learning rooted in mirror neurons. So when we see someone push past fear or failure, our brain starts to believe, if they can do it, maybe I can too. And your fight becomes a roadmap for someone else's breakthrough. Psychologists call this vicarious neuroplasticity. Watching someone grow doesn't just inspire you, it actually starts to rewire your brain, increasing your tolerance for discomfort and improving your effort. And this is bigger than you thinking that your struggle is just your own. But every time you choose to get up when it's hard, and every time you do the thing you don't feel you're ready to do, you're creating motivation towards someone else's future. A daughter who says, I watched my mom never give up, or a stranger who says, your story helped me believe in mine. Because your persistence becomes proof of possibility, and your healing becomes someone else's hope. So don't quit now. Let's shift your perspective. Seth Godin, in the dip, which refers to the moment when the going gets tough, when you stop making easy progress, and when your growth slows to a crawl, is when you're most likely to give up. But he states, extraordinary benefits accrue to the tiny minority who push just a little longer. And that little longer is understanding what the dip actually is. It's not a sign you're failing. It's actually a filter, a psychological sorting that separates temporary interest from true commitment. I want you to imagine this. A miner digs for days, months, and years, then stops just before striking gold. Quitting in the dip is like walking away from buried treasure, simply because the final layer was the hardest to break through. And neuroscience confirms this metaphor, because in brain imaging studies, the highest neural activity for learning, growth, and insight happens just after moments of perceived failure. Your breakthrough lives on the other side of that resistance, and every purpose-driven path includes a dip. So you owe it to yourself to find out what's waiting beyond the dip. Every hero in every epic story reaches the point where quitting looks easier than continuing. This right now might be your moment, but the version of you who doesn't quit, who keeps showing up in the silence, the setbacks, and the uncertainty, is being built this exact second. And that version of you, they get to live a life that the quitter never will. And if this message resonated, drop a comment and let me know you're not quitting. And subscribe to Trauma Free for more science-backed healing, mindset rewiring, and deep motivation to help you create the life trauma tried to steal from you. And until the next time, stay trauma-free and take care.